Alright, there we go. Alright, this interview is being conducted for the Veterans History Project for the Library of Congress. The veteran's name is Dennis Joyner. They were born on October 2nd, 1948. They served in the Marines during Vietnam. They achieved the rank of Corporal. We are recording this on November 30th, 2013. I am John Richter, and I am conducting the interview, no relation. Thank you, Mr. Joyner.
Oh, you're welcome.
So, you said I read that you were born in West Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
How was life growing up for you, and what kind of, I guess, paved the path for you to join the military? Is there anything in your childhood that really got things going for you?
Nothing specific. I had an aunt, actually, that was in the Marine Corps, and she came home on leave and always wore a uniform, and she was very patriotic, so I guess that was part of my influence. But living up in West Virginia, back in the 50s, 60s, it was pretty much a rural environment, small town, like 300 people lived in the closest town that I was at, but when there was any ball game in town, everybody came, even like junior high school, the stands were packed. For that, so it was a good environment to grow up in.
And when did you end up joining the military?
Right after I graduated.
Okay.
In 1967.
Okay. And did you join straight into the Marines from after high school? Was that where you?
Yes. I actually had intended on joining the Army. I'd taken some exams to be a helicopter pilot, and went back for some follow-up and maybe a mix-up an appointment or whatever, but it was like late on a Friday afternoon and all the offices were closed except the Marine Corps office. So Marine Corps recruiter, invited me in to talk while saying maybe somebody else had come back from the Army, and long story short, ended up signing up with the Marines.
That's fun.
Yeah.
So once you enlisted, what was the kind of the chain of events for you after you enlisted?
They had a program to where you could do like an early enlistment, while you're still in high school. You get like basically early commitment, and you basically chose a date, that you wanted to, interact with service. And it was first part of September. I just graduated. A lot of my friends were going to college and so forth, and that really wasn't an option for me at the time. And that's one of the things that my high school counselor recommended, that maybe I would, think about joining the service. And actually, it worked out pretty well for me. And the GI Bill, I could go on and get educated later. But that was pretty much it. You had to choose something at the time, and at that point, I was living in Martinsville, Virginia. And at that time, furniture plants, apparel industry was big, and I really didn't want to make a career in that at the time. So service looked like a better option for me at the time.
And then I'm guessing after you enlisted, you went into boot camp. How was that experience?
Oh, yeah. Well, I went and inducted in Richmond, Virginia, and I met some people during that process that I'm still friends with today. Ended up in boot camp with them, and one very good friend. We were even in the same squad in Vietnam together.
Cool.
And it's a beginning of a life-changing experience, joining the military.
That's good. From boot camp, did you go straight into conflict, or was there kind of a layaway period in between boot camp and being enlisted into the Marines?
The way it works in the Marine Corps is that you are considered to be a basic infantryman, regardless of what your specialty is. If you're a cook or anything else, you're really considered to be an infantry person. And after boot camp, everyone goes to Camp Geiger. That's part of Camp Lejeune. And everybody goes there to learn more advanced infantry training, regardless of what your eventual job is going to be. So I went from Parris Island to Camp Geiger, and had like a 2-week leave. And then went to California. They had like a little more training for everybody else that was going to Vietnam. And I was in California for about 2 weeks, and then short stop in Okinawa, and then in Vietnam in February of 1968.
So it was a pretty quick process.
Oh yeah.
From being enlisted. So.
Yeah, I joined like the early part of September. By February 1st, I was in Vietnam.
Was it a pretty, I guess, a pretty crazy experience going from being, small town to immediately and straight into a conflict like that for you?
You're totally unprepared for that. I think everybody has some idealistic thoughts about the military, and I don't think anything can really prepare you from going even to some civilian life, to being in a full-fledged combat, especially ending up at Khe Sanh.
Now, when you first entered into Vietnam, did you enter in at Khe Sanh and start your tour there, or did you? How did your process of movement when you first entered Vietnam start?
Everybody lands in Da Nang, that are in the Marines. Marines were primarily in I Corps, it's the upper level of Vietnam. And from there, they put your records in some pool, basically according to what your training is and what your job is basically going to be. And you're sent out to areas, and then you're kind of redistributed again from Da Nang. I was sent to Phu Bai, and that's further north. And I was thinking that when I landed at that base, this looks like a pretty secure, place to be. I thought I don't mind being here. And we weren't really prepared for the siege of Khe Sanh or what the North Vietnamese were planning there. And I was told that Phu Bai was really just a rear base for the 26th Marines, that I would be going to Khe Sanh. I thought, well, Khe Sanh, that sounds like an okay place too. I wasn't really prepared for what was happening there.
How long was it? How long were you in Khe Sanh before the actual siege of Khe Sanh began?
Siege was actually just starting when I was there. The siege had started, and getting replacements in was very difficult. I think I was able to land on the third attempt because the runway was under heavy bombardment with artillery, and you're just really introduced to the real thing right off the bat.
Were you coming in via helicopter or plane? Or?
C-130.
C-130?
Yeah, cargo plane.
So was it a pretty harrowing experience to kind of be flying? Oh, man.
Oh, it's during the monsoon season. You haven't seen the sun the whole time, that you've been there. And when the plane takes off, it goes above the clouds. And then when you're descending, you're going back into the clouds. Then you hear all this firing and so forth, and you realize it's not training anymore. And the plane doesn't stop. You don't stop and disembark. They lower the back of the plane down, and they push supplies and things off the back. And they tell you there are some trenches along the runway, and that you better get into a trench.
Oh, wow.
So it's very bizarre. No one planned for that. And I saw this big pallet that was being ready to, be pushed off these rollers on the back. And actually, I jumped a hold of that pilot on a pallet, and I was kind of skidding on the runway, holding onto a pallet. I thought I'd at least be protected.
Oh, wow.
It was about the pallet.
At least there's something there to put a wall.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's just quite bizarre and nothing smooth about it.
And so so obviously you're being thrown right into the middle of things.
Yeah.
How was life as soon as you got there in the middle of Khe Sanh? Did it just become instant, 100% work and shooting and survival from that point?
At this point, they were surrounded by what was estimated about 30,000 North Vietnamese. I'm going to give you a video.
Okay.
And very, accurate historically. A lot of things we didn't know at the time that this video will show you. But we just know that they were surrounded, and we really had no idea. So essentially when the plane left, all the firing at that point stopped. It was their plan to disable or destroy the aircraft with everyone in it, while it's landing. then when the plane, took off, it was just kind of a strange feeling, where everything, stopped, and you don't really know where to go. You just know that you're inside a compound, and everybody else is underground at this point. So someone, points us to where, the headquarters is, and from there we go in and meet, various ranking people, and they decide, which unit that you're going to go with within the 26th Marines. But it was really quite a shock after we met the company commander, and he told his assistant, "Well, take these men down, to the front line." I mean, that was really quite a shock because we were all teenagers. I mean, you're looking at me now as a man and later age, but everything then was like the perspective of a teenager. I was 18 at that point, and so just the thought that I'm going to be going on the front lines of this major conflict was. It was really shocking, yeah.
And how long were you in Quezon and involved with the battle or the siege of Quezon?
We were there until the siege finally lifted, but there was a lot of battles and skirmishes, where we would go outside the lines, and the enemy would try to attack, us. And historically, very few sieges have ever been successful by the defenders going back to the Middle Ages, from what I've learned, that basically when one enemy can isolate, that they're usually successful, but you don't really think of that, too much until one of the company commanders said, "I'm not really sure we're going to make it, out of here." That's like a shock to me as well.
You're telling me that I'm not going to make this?
Yeah.
We're not going to get out of here?
Exactly, and I thought, am I hearing this person, right, and so talking to my friend as they were taking us down, to the front lines, did I really hear what he said, that he wasn't sure we're going to make it out, because it's 4,000 or 5,000 of us here. We just really didn't understand the reconnaissance that was going on. But anyway, obviously we did make it out. I'm sitting here talking with you.
What was your specialty while you were in the Marines? Did you have a special task or assignment that you did for the most part?
My official designation was 0311. That's basic rifleman. From that point on, you can really be assigned to any job, in the infantry. At different points, I carried an M79 grenade launcher. Another point, I was on a rocket team. A lot of people back in the old days may have called those bazookas or something like that. But rockets are very sophisticated. It's a recoilless rifle, you put it on your shoulder. You're also required to carry a rifle at the same time.
Okay.
And eventually I settled into being a machine gunner. And then from that point, leading a platoon of combined Marines and Vietnamese last 7 months.
Now, how long were you in Vietnam? Total?
13 months.
13 months?
Mm-hmm.
So Quezon lasted for how many months out of that? The first?
It was about 3 months, but I was in the hospital part of that time too.
Okay.
I was there a month, and then we had a artillery barrage, and then artillery landed in front of my machine gun bunker and basically destroyed it. And I got wounded in the head, and I got medevaced out first to Dong Ha, and then further on down to the Naval Air Station in Nang.
Okay.
So I was in the hospital really about a month. And then had to go back to Quezon, so it's basically the same thing where you're landing again, amidst all the fire and artillery, going on. But at least I knew where the trenches were and like that.
And was the second time getting back into Quezon a little bit easier than coming in the first time?
I think it was actually worse.
Really?
Because, when you know what to expect, and this thing, you're severely wounded in the head.
Yeah.
And, I still have shrapnel in my head. People saying, well, you have $1 million wound, you're going home. And so I was actually thinking that I was going to be going, back, to the States, because the wound in my head still wasn't even healed at that point.
And they decided they were going to just send you back and get back into it?
Exactly. Later on I was diagnosed with traumatic brain injury. It's really amazing. I've got some pictures to where, a year later, You can see there's still a dent, in my
Interesting.
head where like the skin has grown over, but it's still not completely healed. Yeah, it's pretty much haphazard.
And while you were behind, I guess not behind the lines, but while you were in the hospital,
Yeah.
what was it kind of like being away from the battle and now, away from the sieges, away from the battles, and kind of being, you've experienced it and now you're, kind of away from it. What was the atmosphere like in the hospital, especially while you were in there?
Well, when I was able to get up and move around, I mean, that was, it was really good. I've never had better food than the hospital there. I mean, they had this huge grill that, you have like New York strip on Fridays. Well, I mean, I could talk a long time just on how great the Navy food was compared to the Marine Corps food, or the sea rations that we ate, the same meals we ate every day for 13 months. And you had pancakes, eggs any way you want them, heated syrup, heated butter. It was just great treatment. So naturally you didn't want to leave that and go back to that very Spartan, isolated life.
Yeah.
But that's what you're called to do. That's what you're there to do.
Now, once you got back into the fighting, did you continue to be a machine gunner? Did you pick up a different role, or how did things change your second time?
I was still a rifleman at that point. We had not lost as many men at that point as later on. That's the reason why I assumed so many different roles. Even at one point, I carried a radio, but I wasn't trained as a radio man or anything like that. Nobody's coming in.
Yeah, that's okay.
I really lost track of the question.
No.
But
Just
what
you did afterwards.
Yeah, I remember now. But yeah, I was just a rifleman the whole time, but a full complement of platoon of 60. And by June, after one operation, I was like the last person doing rear security, and it ended up being like 15 of us left.
15. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Just a fourth of what you started out with.
Mm-hmm.
And how was that for you mentally? Just kind of.
At that point, you're not really well focused anything past what's right in front of you. You develop a condition that's commonly known as the 1,000-yard stare, to where you don't really focus anything on past what you're looking at now.
Interesting. Now, you went through the siege of Quezon, and what other, major missions or major battles or incidents were you involved in while you were on your tour around Vietnam?
Well, Quezon was our base, and normally what happens is that you have a base of operation, and you may do some operations for maybe 10 days, 20 days, but we had no real base of operation. And we had essentially one operation after the other. So we engaged in 10 total operations within about a 5-month period. And you were rarely, back at the rear or anything.
Just all out, kind of just. Are you mostly doing like a reconnaissance, like scouting, or are you?
No, it's a battalion-size operation. It's essentially search and destroy.
Okay.
You may have support of helicopters, jets or something like that. But we had no support like tanks or anything like that you would think, like during the Second World War or anything like that.
It's just kind of all on foot.
All on foot, yeah.
And I know that we had talked the other day. How was the interaction with your enemy, with the North Vietnamese? How was after fighting a while? How did you feel towards the individuals that you were fighting?
We actually had a lot of respect for them. The fact that we didn't really have any support other than air power, but that was the significant support system that you would have. You essentially learn battalion tactics when you engage in a superior force, that you would normally stay where you are if you couldn't, withdraw some. and the jets would, drop some napalm, high explosive, and then you would assault a position. So that was kind of a basic tactic of being a large operation. And we were usually, very successful, even though we lost a lot of people, doing that. But the enemy was, they're very experienced. I need to really emphasize, that point, that this country has been at war fighting one, foreign, in their own vision, imperialistic army after the other. So we basically inherited the role of the people fighting the French. Very experienced in tactics, jungle warfare, knew when to hit, knew when to withdraw. And we were essentially teenagers. I really need to emphasize that point as well. We had very few people that were over age 21. If you were 21 in combat there, you were old. And I don't think we've ever had a war where it was considered basically a teenage war. Maybe our company commander, which we rarely saw, he was maybe in his late 20s or early 30s, something like that.
Do you feel that because everybody was so young, did that hinder you in any way, or was it just kind of more along the lines of because you were so young, you kind of bonded together a little bit better?
Yes, we essentially knew we had no one to depend on but ourselves. And you become very skeptical. Even the leadership that you have is basically coming through the radio. I mean, I'm only speaking, from experience, that I have. And it was essentially up to us to carry out, these missions. And these people were a long way off. It wasn't like where they had drones where they could do reconnaissance from air or anything like that. They were essentially looking at maps and, where objectives were and where reconnaissance had spotted superior enemy forces, and we would attack those areas, where the enemy was.
Now, were there times that you, I guess, that for you, being on the attack and being on search and destroy missions, were there times where you felt just almost an overwhelming amount of fear, or had you become so conditioned to it that it's just kind of your job that you just had to go out and do it?
John, you're always fearful. And as a matter of fact, it isn't going out. You are out there. You really don't have any choice. Anyone who tells you that they're not afraid, I think can be telling the truth. It's such overwhelming firepower. Now you really are very fearful, especially when you're not engaged in direct, face-to-face, essentially your rifle combat. They're very excellent using mortars, short-range, long-range mortars, and a lot of times we were close enough to where we could hear the mortars being tubed, where they're being fired from. And when those mortars are going up, you don't know where they're going to land, but they're coming down where you are. So it's pretty terrifying, yeah.
Was there just like a sound you would listen for? Or
oh, yeah.
Some more of the kind of the tradition, I mean, from what movies and stuff depicted, kind of the whistling, falling sound.
Oh, no, you don't hear any of that.
Things just start exploding around you.
It's so noisy, no one can really explain to you how noisy
really?
It is.
Interesting.
During, full engagement, I'm trying to yell some kind of direction because, being a machine gunner, I was getting sniper fire from a certain area. And the machine gunner's job is not to take out snipers, you're looking at large groups of people. And I was trying to direct a rifleman's fire to where I was getting the sniper fire because the bullets were kind of skipping in front of me. But I couldn't even hear myself yell. It was so loud.
Now, obviously you had a wound earlier in your time there with the shrapnel. What was your closest, I guess, did you ever have like an extremely close call, to the point where it just kind of made you stop and just say, wow,
That's every day.
Literally, every day?
Well, I can't say every day. It depends on the intensity, I mean, there are some periods of boredom. I don't want to give the impression that you were fighting for your life every day, because that certainly wasn't the case. But you would get in, these engagement with a superior, very determined enemy force, where it might be that. But you might also later on go days and maybe over a week with no sign or no combat at all. The thing is, you're always ready for it. You always have to prepare that it's going to be that way. But I think it's a false impression, people seeing movies, and it's always a day-to-day thing where people are getting up, yelling around. Yeah, that's just not, the case at all.
I gotcha. And then from, I guess, with the conflict, and being in Vietnam, what ended up bringing you back home from Vietnam? Did you just did the war end, or did you have another injury, or how did you end up returning home at that point?
I served my complete 13 months, and at the end, when it's happening, you almost get acclimated, to that environment. That's the reason why coming home is so difficult. You think it's going to be easy. You think you're really looking forward to it.
Yeah.
But you develop that resistance to reality. And we would have like a common saying, saying, "Well, I know this ain't real," using just common slang and so forth. You go through a monsoon, there's no cover from the weather at all. It's complete pouring down rain the whole time. And you develop the same thing, it's not real, and after a while, you develop the thought process that it isn't real, that nothing, is real. And when you come back, to civilization, basically, that's not real to you either. And it took me really a couple of years to feel that I was back in my skin, that I was back, in a safe area. And these experiences basically led me to, going into the field of psychology. And study, became a licensed psychologist. I'm licensed by the North Carolina Psychology Board.
Cool. Now, do you feel like the isolation from being overseas, I know that we kind of had talked the other day about this, but did you feel like being overseas and being in Vietnam really isolated you from what was going on outside of the battles and outside of what was happening in your day-to-day life?
Oh, you're totally isolated from anything. I think I mentioned to you yesterday that when new people come in, we want them to sing a song to us, like, what's popular. You don't hear the radio or anything like that. The combat veterans, we didn't really see any USOs. These were people, in the rear. This is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You wouldn't know when 1 month would pass into the next month. Occasionally, with a few days, back in the rear, you might see an addition of Stars and Stripes, was like a military newspaper. But those would be weeks, month old. You wouldn't have any idea what day of the week it was or anything like that. You're totally isolated as a teenager. We would have people writing letters, about people going to the prom and things like that, or what our football team, was doing. We couldn't even really relate to that at that point.
Just because it was so distant and so out of context.
Exactly, and you become acclimated, to the environment. When I had about a month left to go from being on my feet all the time and carrying a machine gun, it was always kind of my fantasy at this point, as bizarre as it sounds now, to be a machine gunner on like a gunship, on a helicopter, because you rationalize thinking, well, these people, sleep in a bed at night, they have a hot meal, during the day, they have some flight mission support, things like that. And then, you have a hot meal in the evening. That compared to the life that you're living sounds, very glamorous, yeah.
And then you realize that so many of those gunners get under so much heavy fire at the same time.
Oh yeah, but that, at least, you're on a moving, you're a moving target. And we actually, when I was in the infantry, we rescued several helicopters, that were shot down. It was kind of a race, us to get to them, or the NBA, to get to them. And we always, were able to get to them first. But they were really glad, to see us. And, But, to me, that looked like, the better part. And a friend of mine rotated back, after I did. And I didn't find out until my extension to be a door gunner was approved, but I'd already been, sent back to the States. I was at Camp Lejeune at that point. So, and again, I was thinking, well, what was on my mind, I want to volunteer for this, totally crazy to do that when I could be back here in the States. But I wasn't in the States long. Came back to Camp Lejeune. I was in March of '69, And by June of '69, I was sent to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, which was not a very fun place either.
Now, how would you say, like, what was the atmosphere like at Guantanamo Bay while you were there?
We had a mixture then of people that were right out of boot camp and a lot of veterans. There were a lot of senior non-commissioned officers like myself that were there that we didn't have enough time to be sent back to Vietnam, those of us who joined for 3 years.
Uh-huh.
So they kind of had a place to park us, during the same time, because we couldn't keep doing training at Camp Lejeune because we didn't have enough time to be going back to Vietnam again. But people who had enlisted for 4 years, they went back for another tour.
Okay.
So we were sent to Guantanamo Bay to engage in different types of training. I ended up getting like an early out because a lot of us weren't doing anything productive in Guantanamo or other places as well. It wasn't just Guantanamo Bay. But if we could, be accepted at a college or something like that, so I started going to community college.
Oh, gosh.
But Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, a lot of people don't even know we have a naval base there. It's still there now.
Yes.
That movie, A Few Good Men with Tom Cruise and Jack Nicholson, that's based on service. And Guantanamo Bay, of course, I guess people might know we have a lot of prisoners there from, the war in Iraq that are down there now.
Now, I guess the base now, what were the operations like then as obviously compared to now, or to more of a prison and more of a, an isolated area? What were kind of the operations like there on a day-to-day, especially in the era that you were there?
Essentially, it's a perimeter around the base. A lot of people, when they think of Guantanamo Bay, they just think of a centralized base, but a lot of people don't know that there's a bay, Guantanamo Bay, and really our forces are on both sides of that bay. And it's the leeward and the windward side. And when I first got there, I was on the leeward side, the smaller side. And so our job essentially was to go out. It was like 12 hours on, 12 hours off. And we would go out like a fire team, 4 people would be like in a tower. We would look across like a no man's land at the Cuban soldiers, and they could basically, see us. And but we would have defectors come across like the minefield, risking life and limb, just to defect to leave Cuba to come to the States. And I was in the fortunate position to where I was like the senior person on the watch team. So in your senior position, you get the best watch, which is either the first watch or the last watch. So I had myself scheduled for the last watch. And the sun was just coming up, and I saw a Cuban soldier coming through the minefield. And I thought, am I really seeing things? It's somebody with an AK-47, but I kind of, got back into my Vietnam way of thinking, and I saw what direction that he was going in, and I positioned myself to climb down out of the tower. And he came, walking by. It was my expected intention that, to surrender. And when he walked by, I just, called out alto to him, and he turned around, so I motioned to put his rifle down, which, fully compliant, to do so. And he walked back with me, to the observation post, and then when the truck came around to pick us up, they were like shocked that we had a Cuban soldier.
Just with you?
Yeah. So we're all, detained there until people came out with these black cars, not so much like in the movie where they're screeching around, it's more of a calm type of thing, but they, to interrogate the person, because the people who come across are not always friendly either. They may be spies, for Cuba. They may want to infiltrate the Cuban community as well, the people waiting, to be, sent to Miami at that point. So it's a very controlled, environment there. It's only 3 miles by 5 miles, so it's still very restricted. But the water's beautiful, I can say that.
Now, after you left Guantanamo Bay, what did you? I know you said earlier you became licensed as a psychologist, and you went back to school for that. What was like? I know you'd said it was hard to transition from life coming back from Vietnam. Was it hard to transition from being at Guantanamo Bay, coming back to just good old America from
Yeah,
there?
John, you're just totally unprepared for that because, like at this current time in 2013, people wear very short hair, civilians,
Mhm.
do here. And you can wear hair basically any way you want to. But getting out of the Marines with a very short haircut and going to college with people with very long hair where these demonstrations were going on. And you try to justify, the sense of loss of thinking that you serve for a good cause.
Mhm.
And at this point, you are in this thought process that Vietnam was a good thing,
Mhm.
and that you can't really put in your mind that it was basically for nothing. That I'll just say at the time of getting on soapbox to say you're not at the point where you can look retrospectively. You're trying to integrate your thinking and your sense of loss with friends to these people that are basically protesting what the service was. So
Mhm.
very much turmoil on campuses, very much a lot of angry people, and making a long story short, I ended up supporting those people that were against the war. I ended up supporting them, and the more that I learned about the politics that got us involved,
Mhm.
I became more of an anti-war activist
Interesting.
at the time. So, I eventually became one of those long-haired protesting people myself because we were told a lot of things that just weren't true to get us into war.
Interesting. Now, looking back on that, do you think you would have completely changed the way you approached going into the military? Had you known some of the things that you did once you got out of the service and things like that, or do you still feel like in your heart you did it for all the right reasons and did it for what you had to do and what you thought was best?
I'll do my best to answer that question.
No problem.
At the time, you think you're doing your best. But when you find yourself in these situations to where basically American teenagers should not be, and a lot of the things that you were told to get you there, you found even there was based on things that weren't true. And you question your leaders by giving these orders that you know they have, in my opinion, speaking in my opinion, my experience, very little regard for whether I lived or not.
Yes.
And a lot of other people who didn't live. You find that you become very paranoid of leadership.
Mhm.
You become skeptical of people in leadership positions that really continue today.
Mhm.
And some are founded and some are not founded, but these are basically when you learn to question authority, and is this the best order for you, and what does this achieve anyway? And we knew that we had no defined mission in Vietnam. We knew that when we were there, and that when we came back, we found there was basically no defined mission then.
Mhm.
And you reflect on what's going on with Iraq, Afghanistan, and you kind of keep your opinion to yourself. You don't want to cause discouragement of people who are trying to serve, because this is a volunteer army now. So I keep a lot of my opinions to myself, but this is my interview, and I thank you for the opportunity to say so.
No problem.
But you feel a compassion that there's still a brotherhood with these people who are in combat now, and you don't want to say anything that would decrease their readiness because they're still in combat. But at least I can express the thought that I have now is that these wars were poorly planned out. There's no objective now, for these people. And it's my opinion now that it's a disservice to have men and women now in combat to where there's no objective. And then it's my impression that history repeats itself, and then when we leave these places that we've invested so much blood and money and arguing with each other, that we will find that these are for naught as well. And I think we need to pick our wars much better.
Thank you. Now, you had you had shared with me yesterday a couple pictures and things here and there. Do you mind if I pull them
sure.
up for you? Do you mind going, talking about them just a little bit?
Sure.
Alright. I found this one to be interesting. It's just the map of Vietnam. You were talking about I-Corp, where, if you don't mind showing where I-Corp.
You need to change that?
Or no, just if you just don't mind holding it up. So.
Yeah. Well, I-Corp is basically where most Marines were located. You can see that this is I-Corp right here, and these are areas that I was very familiar with. And this is essentially the ocean here. Okay. And this is all coastline. So the place that I landed, where's the name?
Marble Mountain.
Yeah, it's right around there. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, here's the name right here. It's right on the coast. And the first place that I was sent was Phu Bai, that I mentioned, and I was flown up to Khe Sanh, which is right at the corner of Laos and the DMZ, which is right there. I actually even were in the DMZ at times. We were lost.
Even though you weren't supposed to be.
Pardon me?
Even though you really weren't supposed to be.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going where I was told. We were landed in helicopters on top of this mountain, and just speaking the plan was that the artillery was going to be hitting the top of this mountain and then we would land. Well, the reverse happened. We actually landed the artillery landed on us. Fortunately, no one was killed, but some people were severely wounded right up here at the inside the DMZ. But it was a beautiful morning. Sun was out. Beautiful.
Wow.
Yeah. But yeah, all around this area, we walked all around, through here.
Now, how I guess you said you walked a lot. Like, how much would you say you walked a day?
It depends on how much contact you were in. Sometimes you're surrounded for maybe 2 or 3 days at a time, and
don't really move at all.
Yes, and then when you do, it's laterally. The whole point is making contact, and I think every conflict has to have some objective, and I don't know if you've heard of the concept, the war of attrition. Have you heard that before?
Yes.
That was what our philosophy was. Essentially, it means we kill more of them than they kill of us.
Yeah.
And I don't have anything official, but I like watching the History Channel, and all the estimates of people that we had killed actually exceeded the population of North Vietnam. Just basically statistics that meant nothing.
Yeah. Now, go ahead and skip to this one. This was you before your injury, I take it?
Actually, no, I'm about ready to come home. I don't know if you can see right there, but it's still a dent in my head. That's like 12 months later.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so this is pretty much what I look like, day to day.
Okay.
There. Yeah, I'm kind of speaking for this person here, not so much for this person right now. This is this person's experience.
Very interesting. A lot of bullets and a lot of ammunition.
Yeah.
You carried the machine gun everywhere with you?
Oh yeah, you always have to have a weapon with you. As a matter of fact, when you get out or you come back, you feel very uncomfortable that you don't have a weapon.
Interesting.
Yeah, you feel almost undressed.
Did you ever end up buying a weapon afterwards?
No, actually, it's really strange. I became more of a pacifist.
Interesting.
I mean, the only thing I have now, somebody gave me like a real small .22 pistol. It was a gift. I mean, I didn't want to give it back to them, but I don't even really know exactly where it is at this point. Okay. But just seeing what these weapons can actually do to people, I just didn't want to have them.
It's interesting because you see a perspective of a lot of veterans come home that are very much the gunsmith, gung-ho kind of individuals. It's interesting.
No, it's like I have no need for them. I have nothing else to prove.
Nobody's really going to attack you here on
Exactly. Exactly, yeah.
And this picture right here was you with just after getting your Purple Heart.
Yeah, so this is general. I never really got his name. You might still be able to see the wound still that's what I looked like when I left the wound. I said wasn't even healed up. And I was in still a confused state. I didn't know that I had traumatic brain injury at that point. And when they told me that I was being discharged, I was confused into thinking that I was being discharged completely out of the service, that I was going back home. But I was being discharged to go back to case law, which was quite a shock.
Now, did the injury that you sustained there, has that had any like lingering effects towards you, like since?
You do have some issues with that. Some of that's like, impulse control. That's the reason why I keep myself in a very controlled environment.
Interesting.
I try to stay away from loud or aggressive people. Sometimes you can get drawn into that, or just even reflexively, walking point in a combat position. I kind of equate that to being like a pianist, like a concert pianist, to where they practice so much it's automatic where their fingers, go.
Yeah.
Being in combat, it's automatic how you react to things. It's not something that goes through the brain.
It's not something you think about. It's just something you do impulsively.
Exactly. So you need to keep yourself away from situations, where you don't act impulsively or aggressively or anything like that.
Okay. And then the last one that I really liked myself.
Mm-hmm.
This is you with what is it, a group action or?
This is near Quang Tree. I'm with the combined unit. Actually,
Combined
in charge of that unit. You always have the privilege of leading the platoon, of not going out, but just one of the conditioning things that you learn to be on the move all the time that still kind of sticks with me today. I even sometimes watch TV standing up, moving, just being on the move. And that's how I got that decoration. One of the things, I was on 300 combat patrols just within that period of time, is that you learn to be in motion all the time. And I think the looks on our faces kind of tell a story as well. At this point, I'm just kind of a matter of fact. It's kind of like a blank look on my face, and these people have very much a strictly business kind of look on their face, because we're getting ready to to go out on a patrol.
It's very interesting. Well, thank you for sharing your time with me. And
oh, sure.
Thank you for sitting down. Is there anything else you would like to add? Anything else that you'd like people to know, or anything like that?
Well, I'd like to thank you for taking your time and seeing the value of talking to veterans. I think so much can be learned, by what engagements we choose to believe in. I'm not like a total pacifist. I think, if it's the time for war and conflict, we definitely need to do that. I just felt like I should have been born with maybe the Second World War or something like that. I believed, in that cause. But I would say, to our leaders, or to any of our future leaders who, may be viewing this, especially, who we elect, before you send men and women, into conflict, be very aware that this is real. This is not the movies. This is not something you do to project an image of, being macho or anything like that. These are people's lives, and where we're going, it affects these people's lives when we're going. So I would say we need to be prepared to do these things, to be prepared to go into conflict. I'm not saying we shouldn't be involved in conflict, but just be more wise where to send us and when to send us.
Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right.